Hello, I'm State Representative Jim Buchy from the 84th House District. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm Brad Miller, and I'm pleased to be joined today by State Representative Jim Buchy, who serves the 84th House District, which includes all of Mercer County and parts of Auglaize, Darke, and Shelby counties. Representative, as always, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Brad. I always look forward to it.
So we're going to touch on an eclectic array of topics today. We're going to start with some 4-H, FFA, agriculture programs. We're getting into that time of year when county fairs will be kicking up very shortly. So we'll start with that. Specifically, programs like 4-H and FFA, can you just briefly talk about your district and in other rural areas of the state, the impact that programs like these have on kids?
Well, of course, the main thrust of both FFA and 4-H is building leadership and character, values. We're teaching children all the good things there are so that they can continue to build a foundation for future successes. And that's the hallmarks of FFA and 4-H, character and leadership. And
agriculture specifically is obviously the #1 industry in Ohio and certainly in your district. There's been an effort lately to expand some of these programs to some more urban areas. Can you talk about that effort?
That is correct. We just completed the first year of a pilot project in Cleveland and Cincinnati, where a high school in each of those cities began FFA and vocational agriculture instruction, and then 2 K through 8s that are close by to each one of those high schools in Cleveland and Cincinnati are now having 4-H in the classroom. They have a teacher that teaches the children 1 period a week, 4-H curriculum and projects. And then after school, in the school, they have 4-H clubs.
So these kinds of things are second nature to you. It's been
Sure.
Basically your entire life committed to things like this. Can you talk about what kind of impact this might have on kids in urban areas who did not have this before?
Big impact is that the children being exposed to vocational agriculture training in 4-H are excited about learning because they're involved in hands-on learning. They're involved in seeing the fruits of their labor, literally and figuratively. And then by having projects that the kids can develop other interests, what it's doing is it's kind of rippling out into other classes in the schools, and there's less discipline problems, and there's more interest in learning, there's better attendance, and we're just really optimistic about the future.
I don't think it's any stretch to say, as we move on, that you have a certain affection for Western Ohio. Your district butts up against Indiana, so it's certainly Western Ohio. There was an article recently in the New York Times that had some interesting statistics regarding your district. Can you share with the viewers back home?
Yes, a couple gentlemen have been doing some research on successful areas, and what they did was they studied people who were born between 1980 and 86 and fast forward to see how they were doing economically versus their parents at that same time, at that same age. And in the 84th House District, it's quite apparent that we're doing very well. For example, of the 4 counties, let's see, Shelby County ranks in the 79th percentile in the country. Darke County is in the 87th percentile. Auglaize County is in the 93rd percentile, and Mercer County is in the 99th percentile in the country. What that means is what we're doing in West Central Ohio is working.
That was going to lead me to our next question. What do you think not just other parts of the state, but maybe other parts of the country can learn from the people in your district?
They certainly can, because as you backtrack into what we just talked about in FFA and 4-H, the fact is that West Central Ohio has pretty strong values. I mean, we have terrific families. We have probably a very high percentage of nuclear families, and we have good schools. We have some of the best schools in the state, and the families they're of faith. They're mostly Christians. We have a big Roman Catholic belt in the district, and you put all this together, and what you have is success.
We're going to move on to horse racing. Can you talk about a little bit of the history of horse racing in Ohio, and then later on we'll get to kind of the impact it has on areas like yours?
Sure. Well, of course, we have two horse racing venues. We have thoroughbreds, jockeys on horses. We have 3 tracks in the state that operate mostly on a year-round basis, and then on the standardbred side, harness horses. That's the horses with the sulkies and the drivers. We have 4 tracks in the state. But the real horse racing, as far as on the standardbred side, started 150, 170 years ago when farmers were racing their horses. And so county fair started. And so, we have today 65 counties in Ohio that have standardbred horse racing. We also have one fair I know for sure, Van Wert County Fair, has thoroughbred racing as well. But that's where the genesis of the horse racing started. It started at the county fairs. And so from that point, it's just grown from there.
Can you talk about the kind of impact this has had on Ohio's economy and the agriculture industry moving forward to today?
Okay, well, at one point, Ohio was the #1 producer of standardbred foals in the country. And it goes back to the fact that we have so many counties racing in addition to the 4 racetracks. And what happened was we passed VLTs, video lottery terminals. And what has happened is that has produced a tremendous upswing in revenue to the state. And a percentage of that revenue goes to horse racing. In other words, what's happened is the purses at Thistledown, for example, and Scioto Downs have increased dramatically because of the take from the racinos. And as the number of horses produced grows, both on the thoroughbred and standardbred side, that means more for agriculture, more hay, more oats, more veterinary. So everything that's related that is for the equine industry just is going up exponentially. And of course, as you well know, the 84th House District produces about 10% of total food in the state. And that means we're producing a lot of corn and soybeans and oats and wheat and hay and so on. So that's good for the equine industry, which is a $1 billion industry to the state. So it's huge. It's huge for my district. It's huge for the economy. The revenues are growing, and we're just really happy at the results so far.
So it's definitely an example of many economic factors kind of coming together into one industry.
No question about it.
We're going to close with the topic of the budget, which we have talked about pretty much in every episode this year. By the end of this month, the budget will be signed into law. At least that is the plan as of now. So we'll be moving into a period of time known as the conference committee. Can you just give the viewers back home a brief synopsis of what the conference committee is?
Well, of course, the conference committee will be the culmination of the deliberations of the governor's budget, which was presented to the House. The House passed the budget. We sent it to the Senate. The Senate made changes to it, put its mark on the budget, sent it back to the House, and we did not agree with the changes, and that's why it's going to a conference committee. And a conference committee is composed of 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate, and they discuss and come to agreement on the changes that were made. Nothing new can be done here. It's the change. They deal with the changes that were made so that agreements can be made so that the governor will sign a budget where the language is the same in both houses. So that's what the conference report will do. And then when they present it, it takes 4 out of the 6 to pass the conference report. Then it goes back to the House and the Senate for an up or down vote.
So it kind of sounds like a tall order when you consider you have 99 members of the House, 33 in the Senate, in a very large piece of legislation. Can you kind of talk about how these differences get ironed out?
Well, of course, a lot of it has to do with the philosophy of the chambers. and as it relates to the budget that was presented by the governor. And so, and since both chambers are controlled by the Republicans in the majority, there are some basic philosophical common ground in both the House and the Senate. So you start from that point, and then you work forward as the budget deliberations are there. But you understand that the bottom line of all this is to continue what the governor and the legislature started when the governor came to office, and that's what do we do to have a climate that's conducive for creating jobs. This is all about jobs, and we want to continue in that vein. And so as we work through the monetary issues, this is, follow the money. That's what this is all about. This is the #1 bill that we ever deal with in a 2-year General Assembly, and so we're setting the priorities for the state in education, in Medicaid, in you name the area, and that's what we're doing in the budget.
You mentioned some of the figures that are involved. Obviously, before you sit down to create a budget and determine what gets funded and how much, there are certain offices here in the legislature that monitor these types of things. The Legislative Service Commission would be one example. Can you kind of briefly discuss how these numbers are generated or how they keep track of them?
Well, of course, economists are involved in both the LSC and the Office of Budget Management, and sometimes they don't agree on the figures, but the truth of the matter is there's not that much difference in it, and it's based on trends, it's based on history, it's based on what's happening in the economy. I mean, they're projecting out 2 years what they believe is going to be the revenues realistically, and under normal conditions, it doesn't make any difference who's in charge. The numbers are pretty conservative because they don't want to get caught making appropriations that 2 years down the road are just not going to be able to be met.
Right. We'll close with one final question here. As we move closer to the governor signing the budget and the final package being agreed upon, we've discussed this in the past, but once again, what are some of the things that you think the House and Senate may agree on, or more specifically, the items that you think a good budget should have?
Well, a good budget should set the pace to fund the agencies of state government in an appropriate manner, while at the same time giving to the citizens of this state the best return from that investment. And in this case, from my perspective, I want to see a continuation of spending to the revenues and then reducing personal income tax and other taxes so that the citizens can have more disposable income to spend while we're still providing the necessary state services. That's the fine line you walk, and that's what I work for.
We have a couple minutes left. As you know the drill, you share with your constituents in the 84th how they can reach you here at the State House.
Well, of course, by phone it's 614-466-6344. Or if you want to email me, it's rep84@ohiohouse.gov. And then, as you know, we have a monthly survey, and I encourage all the viewers and listeners to take the survey this month, and that's at tinyurl.com/Buchy, B-U-C-H-Y, June 2015.
And of course, you'll be out in the district as well in the months coming up, because we know you certainly love the county fairs.
I do. I'm terrible with funnel cakes and Italian sauce.
And we'll leave it at that.
All right.
So,
thanks, Brad.
thanks, Representative. We look forward to seeing you again on the next edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. Thanks for watching.